Very appropriate subject. There's been a lot of controversy. I'm not going to name the chat boards or the rooms or anything, but there's been a lot of controversy regarding different opinions of this agree with thy adversary quickly. One thing we have to understand that the English law system that is used primarily worldwide is an adversarial, system of law. It's based on an accusatory system. So because it's accusatorial, it's very adversarial because it's already launching an accusation right from the beginning when it brings a claim into the court system. It doesn't mean that it holds any validity, it's just being accused. So Satan is the accuser, which would lead to the accusation is most likely going to be a lie. And in the world of civil, we call that a civil title. And therefore, that's where the fiction comes in because it's accused upon you that you are a part of that system. As Jesus was accused of being part of that system, in fact, to the point of actually almost declaring him to be a secular king, even though he said, my kingdom is not of this world, before Pontius Pilate, which was the good confession. So we have to really look at what is being said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 25, where it says, agree with thy adversary quickly. What is really going on? And we have to really look at the wording because there's no point just coming to a rash decision on it and then getting into controversies without getting to the bottom of what was behind this scripture. And these are Jesus' words, and he was talking at a time of a civil system, and he was talking about people that were engaged in civil condition, secular activity. And he knew exactly what to say on the matter, and he knew that Caesar basically controlled the money, and there were those who controlled the civil title. And if you were involved in a civil bearing of a title, a civil condition title, a surname, in the Roman law, then basically you were obligated under that system to defend it. Therefore, you were obligated to bear the burden of it and what came with it. So he was being very direct on this scripture. So we want to take it for what it actually says. It says, agree with thine adversary quickly while thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. So when you see that it's paying, a farthing was a type of currency or money, we're in understanding that this is about commerce that's being spoken of here. We wouldn't be speaking about it otherwise unless it's involving money. Now, if I do not have the title, this would be not a conversation to talk about. If I don't have legal title, or I don't have commercial title, and I'm not participating in commercial title and commercial activity, well then there'd be no one bringing me before the judge for the purpose of collecting on something that basically would not exist based on the truth, which is opposite to fiction. But we're going to go a little further because we just want to understand the content here, because sometimes we isolate one scripture and we don't try to look at the harmony within all the scriptures, because if we don't look at the overall picture, we're not going to really see what is really going on. So we're going to go further. Now, we've mentioned this before in actually Luke. Now, the book of Luke is quite interesting in Luke 11, because it was a real attack on the scribes or the lawyers at the time that were trying to write laws upon the people. And Luke 11, which said, woe unto you lawyers, for ye laid men with burdens. The word last in the law of legal means burden. That's why it's called the burden of proof, that you're bearing the burden of the debtor name. So it says, woe unto you also, ye lawyers, for you laid men with burdens grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burdens with one of your fingers. Okay, so very simple. It was also, it went into, woe unto ye lawyers, for you take away the key of knowledge, for you have others enter into what you do not enter. And then, of course, those that enter you hinder. This is the system that we're talking about that was surrounding the world of Jesus at the time he actually did his ministry. And so there was a civil system, as we have today, operating at that time, and therefore we have to look at it from within that level. Now, we know upon Jesus' death, he canceled out the debt. But at the time prior to that, there was an understanding that people were involved in legal commerce in a Roman civil world that actually even minted their money inside a temple called Juno. And so even the term money came from that word, monito. And so we have to really just literally take a fresh breath of air and look directly into the scripture, what's being said, not because of something you were told. And so you're going to need to do your due diligence also. So when you watch the video, I'm not expecting you to just sit there like someone sitting in the, in the pews as someone speaking from a pulpit. And that's why I don't sit up on a platform and talk down to you. I'm talking at the same level. We're all grounded here. And therefore, we're not going to have any errors about us, about who has more knowledge. We're just here to share and do research. So when we go further into scripture, we're understanding that he was talking about someone who was involved in something that could cause someone to be brought to court based on someone's consent to bear a legal title, be involved in commerce, and then be delivered right to the court to enforce that contract. Okay? So if you are in contract, legal contract, you can forget the word covenant because that doesn't have the same meaning. We're talking about legal and contracting. And that was what was going on there because it involved money, because it said you would pay the uttermost amount of money called a farthing. So it wasn't talking about something in that sense spiritual. It was talking about what would happen there. And to agree with thy adversary, well, automatically I would say that the state owns the title. They control the legal title. And if you're bearing use of it, you will pay for its use. And that is just what goes on with legal title. So we're going to go further. We're going to go into scriptures that basically give us clarity, because it's important for us to not just jump. We need to look at the overall picture. Now, if we go to Corinthians chapter 6, now this is Paul, very well versed in the legal civil system of the Romans. And he became a gospel believer and a disciple of Christ, known as a slave of Christ. So he no longer followed the master of the Romans anymore, nor did he basically slave after the civil condition anymore. He was now walking in truth, not in fiction. And Paul, in chapter 6, as Peter said, very hard to understand, very difficult. You have to really read into Paul's writings. And he said, "Be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness?" Now, does anybody, really want to question what is an unbeliever? Well, uniquely, Samuel Johnson's dictionary mentioned that when you started to break down words like Christian name, it would say the name given at the baptism, the name distinct from or distinguished from the gentilitius or surname. Then you look up Gentile or gentilitius in Samuel Johnson's dictionary of 1755, and it clearly states that someone with that type of a title would be one of an uncovenanted nation, one who knows not the true God. Therefore, they'd be an unbeliever, a heathen. So bearing that title and saying that you are that says you are an unbeliever, and that requires your consent. And now in our world, it requires your picture and your signature. Going further, it says, "And what concord," that's agreement, "hath Christ with Belial." Now, Belial, was a worthless man in the Hebrew context, but in the Roman world, they had a version of Belial because they absorbed a lot of cultures. And so Belial was actually a strominus homo, a man of no means. That means he had nothing. He was worthless. He had no basic worth in the world of value of commerce or money. So when he said, "And what concord," he's really saying, what would Christ have to do with the concept of a strawmanus homo, or a straw man, a man of no means? And it says, or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God, which you are, with idols? And because surnames relate to idolatry in their usage, because they were hirelings, and a hireling was basically hired servant wages in its meaning. So, because it means you were serving these temple gods of the Romans or the Greeks that were basically pagan worshipers. So it's hard to place this all together when you're not seeing the full context. But I can tell you that certainly you would have no agreement with anything to do with the state, because the fact is that there's nothing to do with the unalienable position of you born from God versus you having anything to do with an alienable position under a terminology of a legal surname. So you could not be on both sides. You have to choose one or the other. But if you're putting your time and your efforts bearing a title that says you're a legal debtor serving the legal Roman civil system, well, then you are a debtor, and that's where your agreement or concord is. But certainly there is no agreement with Christianity and the supremacy of God with anything to do with being involved with the rulers of men, because we are a separate sovereignty under God. We're not sovereigns. Sovereigns have to have subjects, but we are under that sovereignty, and we're subjects to the supremacy of God under His anointed Son, Jesus Christ. So when we clarify this, we would not. One thing we could say, if we're going to agree with thy adversary, if we took it in a context, I do agree the devil's advocates, which Matthew Henry said on his commentary on Luke 11 on woe unto lawyers. He stated the lawyers own the debt of the company. So I agree that it's their legal title. They advocate no grace. They run a system of earning salvation by works under the mirroring of a legal system that would go back to the Old Testament before the New Covenant came in, where Christ wiped out all the debt. But if I'm going to say I agree with thy adversary, I agree the devil and his devil advocates own their own legal title, and they own the debt associated with it.